Oh, okay. We're going to get started. You ladies can trickle in when you're ready. Thank you so much for coming. For those who came from afar, in the city, wherever you came from, thank you. Summer was probably the farthest, I think. Yes, Fresno.
Yes.
Wait, LA? Oh, Eileen, sorry.
No,
oh, ooh. Wow. That's awesome. Wait, where were you last week? We didn't see you. Oh, no. Well, you're here.
That's what she chose today.
Oh my God, I love it. Okay, welcome to our Talent Collective Quarterly Fireside. I'm Natalie, and we have Tammy and Krista. We will introduce ourselves in a second, but just wanted to, again, thank you for coming. I know it's not easy on a Tuesday night, especially if you have kids or you want to be somewhere else, but this is awesome. Our goal and mission really in creating Talent Collective was to have a space that women in TA, or those who identify as a woman, could come and really grow their networks, grow their profession. And the ways that we do that are with our monthly networking events, these quarterly fireside chats where we bring, thought leaders and experts in the space, with our peer groups, workshops, all the other things. So it's really great to see so many new faces here, and hope you make some great connections. But we're going to go ahead and kick off the event, and we'll do some introductions as well. But I'll introduce myself. Oh wait, Benchling. Oh my gosh, thank you, Benchling.
Yay!
Woo! I do not follow scripts, so this is why I forgot the slide was here. But thank you for giving us the space, Summer, Dean. This is awesome. This goes a long way. It's so beautiful. Oh my gosh. And you decorated for Halloween for us, so thank you. So they were gracious to give us the space as our sponsors. So I hope you guys have a great time. And then I already talked about this. This is who we are. Myself, I've been in TA 20 years, half my career in agency with some of my OG premier people. And then my other half, oh my gosh. Oh, I do this every time. My other half of my career in-house, head of TA at some startups. And now I run Talent Refinery, which is a fractional head of talent firm. So embed in as head of TA for small companies as they need it. And then run Talent Collective. So life is definitely busy, but I love being in all things TA. So that's a little bit about me. And then we have Tammy.
Hi, everyone. For those of you that I haven't met, I'm so excited to meet you tonight. I'm Tammy Dane. I'm the CEO and founder at Rabble Recruiting. What we do in a nutshell is on-demand embedded recruiters, HR, and ops folks. So thank you so much for just taking the time out of your busy schedules to be here. I can't wait to meet all of you.
Hi, I'm Krista Tan, and yes, thank you everyone for coming. Thank you to our amazing speakers. So my background is I worked in agency for 14 years. Half of that was on a desk and IC role, and then half was operations and management. Left the agency world about a year and a half ago, something like that. I went in-house. I did an in-house head of people role for about a year. And then I resigned from my corporate position and have gone all in on Talent Collective. And I'm partnering with Natalie, running some recs and, getting my hand in recruiting, making sure I stay relevant. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Let's see, moving on. So we have our beautiful guests and handsome guests. So I'm going to get off the stage. I'm going to let you guys take it over. So here we go.
Cool.
I think we need this.
Thank you again for being here, and thank you to our amazing speakers. We could not be more grateful for you being here and giving your time and expertise to all of us. I know everyone's going to find so much value in this. I can't wait to hear from all of you. I know Tammy did the prep calls, so I can't wait to hear what you all have to say. And then Tammy, you can take over now.
Okay, so we have to obviously start off the panel with just some introductions. Obviously, we could read from a script, but it's so much nicer for our guests to actually hear directly from you a little bit about your background and your career. So we'd love to start off with that. If you have your mic, you just flick on it to on if you've got it. And Annette, we'd love to start with you. Sure. Can do a little test.
Sometimes they take a second.
Yeah.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Annette Chu, and before I go into an introduction, I just want to say a thank you for coming this evening. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's definitely an honor to be part of this panel, so thank you for the invitation. I head up Global Talent Acquisition and Strategy for Milestone Technologies. I have almost 30 years of talent acquisition experience, but I do like to stop counting at 15, so I'm really dating myself. I started my career on the agency side of recruiting, where I have 10 years of experience at Robert Half, and I've got a fellow former Robert Halfer with me. But when I went in-house, I worked for a number of different startups, Planet RX, and so I'm really dating myself. Planet RX, where we went through a successful public offering, as well as Solar City, which is now Tesla. And I also gained global experience working for Riverbed, as well as SAP. I joined Milestone Technologies last January 2022. As the global head of talent acquisition and strategy, I manage a team of 70 people and report into the COO. Thank you.
And we can just go straight down the line. Kelly, if you want to go next.
I mean, that's kind of hard to follow, but I'm going to try. So I'm of the mindset that nobody says I want to be a recruiter when I grow up, and most of us just fell into it. And that's definitely me. I'm 30 plus years into this. Recruiting will always be my first love. And I have scaled companies over the last 30 years. Typically startups are kind of where my love language. I like the impact and the ability to move quickly. I love working with founders. Sometimes I don't love working with founders because it can be challenging, and I know many of you can probably relate to that. And I'm super excited to be here tonight.
Awesome. Thanks, Kelly. Hi, my name is Dean Talanazar. I'm the head of talent here at Benchling. Woo! Of course, the team stayed to support.
Give the team a raise.
That's right. A little bit about Benchling. I think there was a couple questions on what we do, and here at Benchling, we build a platform for scientists. So we're helping scientists that work on R&D in the lab to manage their research, manage workflows, and manage kind of their processes and how they access that information. And so we're just trying to help kind of scientists move their science forward more quickly by tracking information and helping them be one single source of truth for them. I've been here for 3 years now. September was my 3-year anniversary, and I've been in recruiting for over 15. I think notably, I spent 5 years at Zynga during their hypergrowth, learned a lot there as an IC and an early leader. And then before here, I was at Climate Corporation right after their acquisition and kind of saw that grow from 300 to 600 and learned a lot there about leadership and kind of working with a startup that was acquired by a larger company and how to work through some of those things, and kind of brought both of those experiences here to kind of lead this company through its growth over the last few years. And so that's a little bit about me.
Great space. And thank you for inviting me as well. The first time I was at this event was in your opening or your launch back in June, and it feels like a year ago. Yes. Right. It does. Right. It just feels crazy. So I guess I would say I've had a busy year or busy life, so to speak, because I've changed my career a couple times before I fell into TA, and I have not since left there. So it's been just a continuous journey. I'm currently with Oura Ring, so I have to do my John Cena move. So if I do this, that means you can't see me anymore, right? That's his move. So it is a health tech, wearable tech. I think people like to think of us like competing with the Whoops or the Garmins, but we tend to like to think we like to compete with the Apples and the other watches. So happy to talk. I can talk about the Ring all day long. But I'm excited to just be here.
All right, so we're going to get into our questions here. I think we can all agree that this last year has been quite the whirlwind, to say the least. So to kind of set the stage for the rest of the conversation, we'd love to hear from each speaker on, what this year has been like for you. Were you hiring? Were you laying off? Were you on freezes? And just kind of set the stage for the rest of the conversation. So we can start with you again, Annette.
So I'm going to take a step back and talk a little bit about 2022, just to provide a bit of a comparison. So last year was an incredibly busy year for Milestone Technologies, and I couldn't hire recruiters fast enough to manage our rec load. Fortunately, I had a relationship with Tammy and Ravel, and from that partnership, they were able to they helped me navigate through to the other side, where I was able to take not only the TA organization, but also Milestone Technologies to greater heights. We were able to not only achieve, but exceed our growth goals and revenue targets. And so while it may sound like a shameless plug, it really isn't. It's really the absolute truth. But in any event, when I look at 2023, it is vastly different. Many of our clients at Milestone Technologies are a lot of technology companies that were hit hard, really starting Q4 of last year and still well into 2023. And so that had a direct impact on our business. And so unfortunately, I actually had to reduce headcount by about 27%. Yeah.
Annette's making me nostalgic for 2022 because it was such a good year for all of us. I told Tammy, 2023, I'm referring to it as death by 1,000 cuts, literally and figuratively. 0 out of 10, do not recommend. That being said, I'm thinking it feels like things are starting to change a little bit, and companies are realizing, we might have gone a little bit too psycho on the cuts, whether it's in recruiting or just overall. And I think 2024 is going to be a much brighter future for companies and hiring. So.
Yeah, it definitely starts to seem like we're seeing some green shoots. But at Benchling, 2022 was kind of insulated for us a little bit. We have end markets that are pharma companies, so a lot of them are still investing in long-term solutions. So we saw the enterprise perform pretty well, but then kind of towards the end of the year, we started to see the mid-market really struggle with less VC funding, and there was kind of a reset in biotech funding, which has resulted in just kind of a pullback a lot in the mid-market on software spending growth. And so some of that started to affect us, and we had to do a small layoff in the beginning of the year. We had planned coming into the year for growth, and then we kind of replanned and then said, we better take some proactive steps here to make sure that the cash we have on hand is the cash that we have for the future, and had to make some hard decisions around our team. So we ended up cutting about 75 people at the company, and we had about 9 people impacted in the recruiting team. And so 2023 has been a lot about kind of flexing to still support the hiring that we have to do for the company on both backfills and some headcount that we had to add to the company to invest in like the product areas where we wanted to go further upstream in enterprise. So yeah, it's been a challenging year, but some hopefully green shoots kind of starting to show here in the second half.
It's great. It's love to hear all these good news. I would say we started to look at our forecasting back in July 2022. So we were one of the first companies to do a mini layoff. And I call it mini in the sense not because I'm trying to, make sure that it's not important, but rather it was actually never listed on the layoff FYI list. So I consider that a success in terms of employment branding. Like we knew we were going to hire again, but we definitely had some pause. Aura is also a Finland company, which meant their laws are very different from the US. In the US, you can lay off someone and start posting jobs immediately. Over there, it took us 6 months of negotiation that we had to work through. So if we decided to open a role, even in the US, we had to verify that nobody in Finland could take the role. So it's very advanced in protecting workers, just like they protect, 1 year plus of mat leaves and pat leave. It always makes me wonder, like, why are we slightly behind on those things? So that's a different panel. But in general, so what that meant was in hindsight, we really, I guess, appreciated the layoff earlier, knowing what happened next, because we were able to help our employees that were affected, help them find roles. There were definitely more jobs in the market. So it didn't feel as panicked as it might be, say, today. One of the things I couldn't convince my boss at the time was to hire full-time recruiters, which makes sense because we had to lay off a few of them as well. So we did the RPO route, and instead of a large RPO, we actually worked with a boutique firm. And this firm actually really helped us decide and give us the data to figure out our long-term growth plan. So the good news is I was able to convince our CEO to actually have 2 full-time headcount that I just filled. It was 1,600 applicants for 2 roles. So it definitely, the volume was there. And I was telling someone it's actually within 24 hours. So I had to pull it down. And these 2 people just started this week. So it was a very quick fill, like what Annette said. In 2022, we were on our knees begging for recruiters. I mean, I took so many declines, like so many declines. I know who you are. I'm just kidding. So that's okay. Like, we look forward. On a more personal front, for me, I actually had long COVID in January. So sometimes you'll find me with a phone is because I do have foggy brain. I could taste the food today, but sometimes I'm not able to taste the food, not the smell, and it has affected me personally where I took more time to focus on myself. And finally realizing, like, this whole work-life balance talk we talk about, you just end up having to own it once it's happening to you. So that was my personal growth this year.
That was so great. Thank you all for just sharing so openly and being so authentic and sharing your experience, because I'm sure it's the experience of many others in this room as well. And we all want to have gatherings like this so that we can learn from each other. So the $1 million question next is, what have you learned? Like, what have been some of the biggest learnings or takeaways from this challenging year? I actually want to reverse order and actually still start with Ginny, because actually I feel like it's the next level of the response that you just gave us. It sounds like you had some personal learnings that actually came from the year. We'd love for you to just continue on.
It's funny because we're a health tech company. So during the time of slow hiring, we really reverted back to employee experience, retention, just things that maybe you just didn't have time to do, being more thoughtful about your engagement survey, so it's not just another survey. So at least personally, I got the chance to look at talent acquisition and talent management as the same flow versus just recruiting in people and then HR take care of the employees. So I really enjoy that personally. And I find that our current chief people officer, that's also her stance, which, by the way, she is my third boss since I've been there at Aura. So I've also gone through changes in that way too. Yeah, it's not recommended, but it was a lot of learning. But I think what your question was, like, how am I learning, like, how to work with headcount, prioritization? We talk about prioritization a lot, right? And we talk about it in the beginning of a headcount planning, and then it just kind of flows. So now I've instituted a monthly meeting with our ex-team members, including our CEO and COO, where we actually go through and reprioritize roles. We also use our finance team to be the bad cops, right? It used to be we get to say, in recruiting, we don't have the bandwidth, slow down. Now we say finance actually don't want you to hire this early. They want you to slow down. They want you to be cognizant and be intentional in how we hire. The third thing I'm doing is very nosy of me. I demanded a daily ring sales report. So I can see the trend, and if I've seen something's off, I would like to slow roles by 2 or 3 weeks. So they gave me a little bit more of control. For someone who likes control, that feels good. So I'm not saying it solved all, but I think it just makes me more cognizant. in making decisions and knowing I just don't want to go through another layoff. I don't like seeing companies going through third, fourth layoff in a year. So that's why I'm being stingy myself.
I think we've applied some of the same things. I think, things that we learned this year, one was kind of similar, like just being more intentional about what we're planning for, especially even if we're backfilling a role. We introduced kind of a new process to have hiring managers think more about like, is this the most important role that you need to fill? Is this the most important thing across your organization that you need to fill? Could you invest in a different area on a different team where you may be misshapen today that you weren't in previously? So just harder questions at that level to make sure that like the business is aware that they need to think about this more critically. And that's worked well because I think in a lot of areas we may not have backfilled where we thought we needed to, or we're flexing in some way. I think the other place that has been really awesome is just our team has been really resilient, and we've had to flex as a team this year. So you can end up kind of being misshapen as a recruiting team when you have attrition in areas that you didn't think you were going to have attrition in, but now you do. And then, it's not exactly a direct talent match between a business recruiter having to help out on tech sourcing and some of those areas. So we've seen our recruiters kind of step up and, step sideways or wherever they need to kind of help support so that we can make sure that we're backfilling teams as quickly as possible. I think that's the other thing that we've learned is, when you lose talent from a team, you lose time on your roadmap. So we got focused on time to hire. We didn't want to over-index on time to hire because I think that can create the wrong behaviors. But let's monitor it and still hire with a lens on diversity. But make sure that we're thinking about teams and that they're a few people down or a person down can impact their plans, and how can we help support that. I would say those are some of the key learnings that we had this year.
So one thing I want to say as a kudos to Dean, as your team was flexing, that's a kudos to your leadership, that they were willing to be like, hey, let's all lean in, it's all hands on deck, so good on you. I didn't have as positive experience as Dean did this year, but we went through 6 layoffs in the last 12 months, and all of you who build companies, it's so painful to unbuild a company. So it's been pretty brutal. But again, I like to hire people that are competitive and want to win. So we're like, what should we do with all our spare time? So we did something I think that was actually really interesting and pretty helpful, kind of to what Dean was saying, like, hey, where should we put backfills? Is the person who left really how we should use that headcount when we're trying to be really thoughtful and intentional about headcount? So we went through an exercise with each of the direct reports of the CEO, and we literally went line by line, every employee in their group, and there was 3 columns. Are they a single point of failure? Are they someone we should maybe try and upgrade quietly? And are they a flight risk? The terrifying ones were that we're all 3. Like when they were a single point of failure and they should be an upgrade, okay, wait, let's talk about that. That doesn't even make sense. So that really helped us to be very thoughtful as we were increasingly, as the year went on, being more and more thoughtful about how we spent our dollars. And we also started a leadership and mostly engineering leadership meeting where every time someone quit or left or we let someone go, we actually brought it to the whole group to say like, hey, we have this one headcount. As a team of leaders, let's talk about the best way to use this headcount. And so there was buy-in across the board, so no one felt like, oh, I didn't get my chance or I didn't get what I wanted. They were really trying to think about what was best for the business. And initially, it wasn't that productive of a meeting because people still had their own agendas. But over time, you could see people understanding these are people who care deeply about a business that's struggling. Like, let's do the right thing to try and get us across the finish line.
I think my greatest learning this past year was really recognizing the value of a management system. And I, if I may, I'm just going to ask a show of hands. How many of you guys are familiar with what a management system is? Okay, a handful of you guys. What's interesting, so a management system is how it, at least in my, for me, a management system is really at the core of how to run a talent acquisition organization, where it goes beyond putting together metrics, putting together a prioritization criteria, which all of those are components of your management system. It takes into consideration all of your numbers, all of your recruiters, your rec load, and figuring out what's that, to put it simply, what is that common thread? What is that common denominator in terms of what makes the most sense by way of rec load for each recruiter, depending on the vertical. So if your organization is, if you have some cohorts of, G&A recruiters, sales recruiters, engineering recruiters, et cetera, what is your recruiter capacity? And that, by putting together that sort of model, that sort of formula or algorithm, it allows you to, or has allowed me to be able to execute in a way where I'm very, very nimble and I can be highly responsive to the business, certainly if the business expands, right? But at the same time, it allows me to respond quickly when the business contracts. And so I have a sense of what's coming and I can better plan, I can plan better. And so that is, I think, my greatest takeaway in ensuring that, having that strong management system and adding additional management systems in my sort of TA toolbox, as it were.
Awesome. Thank you all for that. Now we're going to shift gears a little bit to the here and now. So Q4 and maybe even into 2024. Would love to hear from all of you, and this is the last question for the whole panel. But tell us a little bit about where you do anticipate hiring, if at all, in Q4, and then what areas of talent do you see the most demand happening, maybe even this quarter, but beyond into 2024. And Annette, we'll go with you again.
For the balance of the year, we still anticipate Milestone Technology still has quite a bit of need to hire. And so being a management services company, we hire for a few different sort of categories. Billable positions for our clients, non-billable positions, in other words, corporate positions. But also we have a staffing arm to our business. And so there will still be a fair bit of hiring now through the end of the year. As I look towards 2024, I am hopeful for a much stronger, much busier year. I think it will be. I do feel as though, and I can validate it with my numbers. I do see the market, the business landscape improving. Things are opening up a little. So that's very encouraging and very positive. But I don't anticipate the business to be anywhere near 2024. I think it will maybe come back by half. But in terms of areas where I see some additional growth is really more specialized technology, technology positions, Salesforce, ServiceNow, which is a big part of our business. And the market might open up where there is a need to hire more recruiters. Yes, great. Technical recruiters primarily.
So I agree with a lot of what you said. I think, sadly, where we're not seeing growth and we've seen a ton of cuts is in G&A. And I think that's really unfortunate when you think about the heart and soul of a company and the stuff that really gets stuff done, keeps the lights on, keeps your people happy, is G&A. And I don't see that bouncing back probably for another 12 months. I think so many companies went so deep in cuts in really super technical folks that they're now realizing, oops, that might have been a mistake. So they're either bringing some of those folks back or they're trying to refill those roles. And I think that will continue for the next 6 to 12 months. I think highly technical roles will always be in demand. I mean, software engineers, electrical engineers, mechanical engineers, all of those kind of things will always be in demand. So I think it's also, how are companies thinking about, as they're thinking about making cuts and you look at G&A, where are those transferable skills where maybe they could help somewhere else in the company short term until the company can right size. And I wish that companies would spend a little bit more time on that in the next 6 to 12 months because there's such great talent in that G&A function. That I think once they're kind of cut loose, they're kind of floating and not sure what to do. And I see those people starting to move into other areas, and we're losing good people in core functions because they feel frustrated and they're moving into other things. And I think that's really unfortunate. So that was a real buzzkill answer, sorry. Let's see if Dean can pick up the mood in the room.
Maybe we can change the tone. No, I think, for us heading into Q4, we still have a lot of hiring to do in engineering. We've had some attrition in engineering, so we continue to backfill some roles there, and we have a little bit of new headcount growth there as well. So I think the primary focus is going to be in engineering as we see folks kind of move around in the market. There's still a lot of opportunity out there for, like you said, for the technical roles and for engineers. I think we'll also see, for us, a focus on sales and CX, where some folks are moving around there too, and we'll continue to make sure that we're building those teams. We have a leadership principle about we obsess about our customers, and so we want to have really highly capable CX implementation people, and also in sales. I think looking ahead next year, I feel like Kelly, you're kind of right. I think things could be flat kind of in G&A, and we'll see, maybe some pieces coming back as teams get pushed in different directions where they may have to add a few more pieces, but I don't know that they're going to be able to scale very quickly. But I think it's also still a little uncertain. I think we all are kind of looking out, and one thing I'm proud that we did as a company this year was just kind of say hey, we have a plan, and we think that we have line of sight on that for 6 months, and we're not going to try to make a call on what's happening in 12 months from now. We're going to kind of reevaluate as we go. So I'm optimistic from that side of it. And then I also think that sometimes a lot of these companies are going to face challenges where, hey, they thought they could get by with what they had, but now they need to invest in this new product area, and they're going to need to build out that area to continue to drive revenue. And so I think we may see the market push itself in ways that it really didn't know yet, because they just don't have line of sight on how they're going to continue to close big enterprise deals and things like that. So I'm hopeful for next year, and I keep hearing good things about some of the agencies are hearing more from teams, and they're getting reached out to help support some of the hiring that maybe the internal teams can't cover right now. So I think we'll continue to see that, where the market is going to need to flex the same way we've flexed internally. I think we're going to see the market kind of flex a bit as it recovers heading into next year.
I'll just plus one for all, and then I'll maybe switch gear a little bit. I do think now we have a situation where companies, it's hard to distinguish ourselves, when it used to be we could have been the one that said we never laid off anyone. We were just growing like a rocket ship. But that's not the case. That's not the case in the past year and a half. So I do think companies that reinvest in employee brand management and employment brand, and I don't mean spending money and marketing dollars. I'm talking about more grassroots, community, connections, so that you're building in a way that talent will come find you because you've kind of built the message of what kind of company you are versus what company you were because of the things you did, like 6 layoffs. So I think that's part of it. Now, obviously, if you're in TA branding, you still want to work for companies that you believe in versus the ability to just talk up about them. So I think that's one area that is interesting. I'm seeing some employee experience, employee engagement, talent branding type roles, which is actually a very transferable skills for recruiters. So that would be something I would, possibly entertain if I was going that route. The other thing I'm seeing is anything in the health tech, climate tech, Series A through C, anyone's getting, VCs are still giving money. So they still have runways for 1 to 2 years, 3, and being our pace, you may not be at a company for 3+ years. So actually, the timing of 2 years shouldn't be that frightening. It's actually probably an opportunity for you to learn very quickly as the first head of or the first recruiter. So I'm seeing that there. I'm also seeing attrition. So like you said, you're still backfilling engineers. And I think what that means is, at least for companies, for good people, they will still find ways to leave, right? They want new challenges, new opportunities. That actually gives companies like ours that are backfilling an opportunity to bring in fresh talent, someone that looks at things differently. And the last thing I'll say is, at least for us, we are a fiscal year company. So our Q1 started in October, 2 weeks ago, which means that in September, we didn't have a September surge because we were wrapping things up. We were actually planning for an entire fiscal year. And we finally did that. Now we're ready to launch. I think this past couple weeks, I opened 5, 6 roles. And to me, like, that's actually progress because it wasn't like that even a year ago. So I'm going to count my blessings and hope it continues to intentionally build, and maybe for people to find new roles outside of our company who've been there for 4 or 5 years, and we can bring in new talent as well.
Great. Thank you all for that so much. We want to switch things up a little bit and bounce around. So some very bespoke topics came up in prepping for this event that we wanted to pick each of your brains about. So we have individual questions coming your way now. The first one's going to be for Kelly. And I will say these are like fun, kind of different topics than what we've been talking about, related, obviously, to the overarching theme of talking about this year and going into next year. So if we're asking a question of Kelly, for example, and Annette, you're really passionate about it, you want to weigh in and jump in, like, feel free. You know, we can make this a little bit more of a discussion. So yeah, first question, Kelly, is for you. Astra was hit particularly hard, and we thank you for being like super transparent about your experience because, like I said, there's folks in this room that have dealt with something very similar. One of the things that I've heard, I talk to recruiters all day long, is the struggle of how hard it is to be a recruiter right now, whether you are working at a company or not. Obviously, if you're not working, it's super hard and very challenging, and if you are there, recruiting's become even harder, especially if the company that you're at has dealt with layoffs. And so you're now, you know, obviously the brand ambassador for a company and are struggling to, one, do your job, right? Which is present all of the awesome things about that company. Just because a company has gone through layoffs doesn't mean they're a bad company to work for. They've just hit tough economic headwinds like everyone has hit this year. So how did you coach your recruiters? How did you coach your team to work through those conversations with talent and just kind of walk that really fine line about being transparent, but also sharing the best of Astra?
So that was probably how I spent the majority of my time in 2023, besides laying people off, was really keeping the recruiting team motivated. Because you think about a very high-performing team that cares deeply about building a company that's competitive, so based on like getting good results, and you're trying to talk to very high caliber folks at really great jobs, be like, hey, you want to come do this really cool thing where, yeah, we had a delisting notice, yeah, we've had 6 layoffs, yeah, blah, blah, blah. So it's a hard sell. But I think inherently, great recruiters are great storytellers. And great storytellers can always get someone across the finish line when they know which buttons to push. And I think knowing that one story doesn't fit all. And so I think the bottom line is we had something that a lot of companies don't have. We were building rockets and launching them into space. Okay, rockets are cool. So that got us actually a long way into the first conversations, like rockets are freaking cool. And I think being able to get people excited about our mission and understand that also the recruiting team was very genuine. And we had a lot of really hard discussions about like what's our moral compass on what we can say to people and what we can't say, because we're not going to lie to people. We talked to a lot of very smart people who know how to use Google and see what is happening with the company. So typically the candidates would bring it up before we did, which was a really nice way to handle it. And the recruiters were like, hey, these are tough times, but we're still really bullish on this company getting the next rocket into space and doing these things. And this is an adventure if you want to join. And I always tell candidates, I have a sweatshirt that says, I'm not for everyone. And it's a fact. And Astra was not for everyone either. And it was really important that we were very clear to people like what they were walking into. It wasn't just the delisting notice and all of those kind of things. It was also like, as we hired every leader, you're going to get your hands dirtier than you probably have in a decade. And you have to be prepared to be that player coach and be that person. And that was kind of the DNA that we were looking for. So we had developed kind of an Astra archetype that we did like our kind of like back office check on these folks as we were walking through the questions with them and getting them qualified. Like, do they really have what it takes to be part of something that's super hard, but like the reward is also crazy? I will tell you, I've been doing this a really long time, and I've never had a more visceral reaction in an office than when 400 of us are gathered around a giant jumbotron like the size of this area, and you're listening to the 10, 9, 8. It's not, I can't do it as well as the guy who did it, but anyway, like you're literally holding your breath, and then when the rocket takes off, you're like, should I cry? Should I scream? Should I be quiet? What should I do? My point is, like, when you're talking to a candidate about being able to be a part of that moment, that's the stuff that still got people there in the hard times.
Yeah, really.
That was less of a buzzkill than my last answer, right?
Yeah. Does anyone want to expand on that, or? Okay, yeah. All right, the next question is for Dean. So you implemented a new initiative this year called Hiring 2.0 at Benchling. So tell us all about that and what's new for you.
Yeah, great time to introduce a new hiring architecture, right? No, we did a lot of work last year on this concept around Hiring 2.0, and I think our founders have a really keen sense of recruiting and are deeply invested in creating a structured process and clear criteria. And one of the things was when we kind of grew during our hypergrowth, a lot of the hiring that we did was deeply embedded in engineering and CX, and everybody had a really tight structured process, but we needed something that kind of was a company-wide standard that we needed to implement so that everybody knew what great hiring looked like at Benchling. And so we implemented 4 key areas, I would say. One was really focusing on clear criteria. So we invested more in inclusive job descriptions and reviewing all of our job descriptions, getting those to be more accurate, more succinct, and actually shorter. And then we also we built an interview plan for every single job. And so we invested more into our interview plan template so that recruiters and hiring managers had a better place to start from. And we encouraged everyone to kind of build their hiring plans for their roles. And then we extended those hiring plans all the way into Greenhouse so that every scorecard and everything matches back to the interview plan. And when you log in as an interviewer, you see all that information directly in Greenhouse. The other place that we invested was in structured interviewing. So we've been doing structured interviewing since I started here, and they started before me, which I thought was awesome as an investment as a company early on. But we built our leadership principles into our interviews as this next step. A lot of teams were doing it, but we didn't have kind of this broader, kind of view of it as a company. And so we standardized there too, where we used our leadership principles. We created kind of a leadership principle question bank that people could pull from, and then we asked every interview to have some part of it be a leadership principle interview as well, so that we could kind of get some of this culture add information from interviews, and we were doing it more succinctly across teams, and that worked really well. And then the other piece that we did was just really around enablement. So going out and working with hiring managers directly on improving their interview plans, improving their job descriptions, training them on what this all meant and why we were doing it. And that's paid off really well. We've seen some awesome things in our candidate experience survey where people are saying that they it's set better expectations for what to expect joining the company. They've felt a deeper sense of belonging to Benchling going through the interview process. And our job descriptions are more accurately representing what the roles are that they're interviewing for. And so we scored 8.8s out of 10 on all 3 of those questions, which I thought was really telling about, the work that we did, even though, as things slowed down, it felt now the treadmill's slowing down to be able to go do this work. But teams really embraced it, and we were kind of proud of what we accomplished.
I love that. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
Next question is for Annette. Very similar to Dean, one good thing, one bright side of hiring ebbing and flowing this year is that we have had time to revamp processes or implement new things. So as you look back at the year, what are you most proud of accomplishing?
So I think there are a few things, if I may. One, I think the overarching statement that I can make is, as far as what I'm most proud of, is really investing in people, processes, and systems, our technology. One of the things that my organization was tasked with was a relatively large enterprise-wide transformation project, which was to migrate from one ATS to another. And we had to do that because we had acquired 2 other companies, and therefore we were working on 3 systems, and that doesn't scale. Certainly from a reporting perspective, but in any event, it gave me an opportunity to look at processes and look at the systems. And so one of the things I did was overhaul our end-to-end process and really standardize everything really from end to end, so that we were following one global process. And through the overhaul, we did a lot of what you did, Dean, here at Benjamin, where we took a look at the job descriptions, we overhauled everything, ensured that we had comprehensive job descriptions. We ensured that we had not just gender neutral language, but neutral language. Really just neutral language from the standpoint of age, race, gender. And we did all of that really starting in Q4 because of wage transparency legislation. And so that was really sort of the start of it all. And so that's what we had done from a process perspective. We were very successful in implementing transitioning to Talea. We were chasing a very tight deadline, but we made it. We launched a week early, which was great. But something else that I'm really proud of is investing in people. Despite the fact that we did have to go through some cuts, we did a lot of what you did, Dean, at Benchling, where we provided more training. But I provided training. We provided training, my leaders, not only for the recruiters, but I provided training to my direct reports. And I took sort of a 2-prong approach because it was an opportunity to sort of divide and conquer, right? If I gave my leaders the tools and skills that they needed to up-level their recruiters, but also to help them navigate and guide the recruiters through this very difficult time, they will certainly be very well equipped to continue to grow and navigate and guide the team in busier, in busier times, really. So I know that was quite a bit, but the fact that things were a bit slower, we had more time to really build a stronger infrastructure, and I think we'll be better for it going into 2024.
Yeah, it's nice how you can build more of a foundation that you can really, go off of it moving forward, and it sounds like you both did that really well. Our next question is for Ginny. So this next question is about maybe an unexpected challenge that has come with this market. So from the hiring manager's perspective, it may seem that, there's so many people out there looking, recruiting should be a lot easier, we can have our pick of the litter, so to speak. So they may be becoming more selective, while at the same time, what the recruiters are experiencing is that many people are hesitant to leave their current roles because of the instability in the market, and what's known at their current company may be better than what's unknown at another company. So talk to us a little bit about how you were coaching hiring managers through this interesting dynamic.
It's an ongoing thing.
Yeah.
But I will say, if there's a silver lining to these mass layoffs, there shouldn't be, but if there is one, it would be the fact for the first time our hiring managers don't have this negative connotation of the green banners, right? Or making assumptions that people were let go because of performance. It's just so rampant that in their mind, and they have all the other experience of maybe their loved ones, their family, they're all experiencing the same thing. So I would say empathy is probably a natural occurrence. Like, I didn't need to coach them on that. I could see that. On the flip side of that would be, well, then there must be someone better around the corner. We should wait. We should, right now nobody else has 5,000 offers, so they can be patient. So that's the opposite side of that effect. And I think we sort of reverse re-engineered to the point where we asked them, what does good candidate experience look like? Like, remember when you were a candidate, what did you remember that was good and positive? So if they were able to recite that, we took that and said, then that's what we're going to do for our candidates. So like I said, we had 1,600, candidates for 2 roles. We really figured out a way of like how to speed up our process, speed up our review. And instead of waiting till the very last moment to give them the unfortunate news that they were not selected, we actually gave them in between news, and we would train the hiring managers to actually give those type of news if we have to. So, like I said, it's ongoing. I don't know how long it would last once the market is back, but for now, I'll take it.
Great. I can't believe we're actually at our final question before we open it up to the audience to ask questions. So start thinking about what questions you might have for our panelists. So last question for the evening that everyone's going to get, 2024. So we've already touched on it. What do you think 2024 is going to bring for recruiters, for talent acquisitions? This question is intentionally vague because you can answer it from your own experience as a recruiter right now in real time, leading a team. If you already know what your headcount plan is going to be, that's rare, but obviously that would be great insight into what recruiting is going to look like and talent acquisition is going to look like in 2024, but intentionally vague so you can take it where you want to go with it. So Annette, we'll go to you first, 2024.
I was thinking about this question, ever since I was forwarded the information from the Talent Collective, and yeah, I don't know. I really don't. On the one hand, I do feel as though the market will come back quite strong. I know that because of several different factors. When we look at the job market, when we look at the rate of unemployment, when we look at the rate of inflation and the increase of wages for the workforce, right? Those numbers are very positive. When I reach out to colleagues who are recruiters for recruiters, I think Dean mentioned this, companies are reaching out to them to pay a fee for a recruiter to find a recruiter for the company to hire at a cost, right? Even though there are plenty of recruiters in the marketplace. And so I do feel as though recruiters for recruiters are a really strong bellwether of what the economy, the trajectory that the economy is on. However, I still am, I'm divided. I just don't know. If I may, let me think about. I still don't have a question from the time you emailed me.
That's also the answer, because
Yes. It's unclear to all of us, and this is all a hunch, right? And so part of the point of this is to all put our heads together and figure it out. So, yeah.
I'm going to go down a different path. I don't know how many people in this room are currently looking for a job. I'm the only one on the panel who's in that category. But I think in the very short time I've been looking, I've had a very real awakening around candidate experience. I personally, it's something I'm super passionate about when I'm working somewhere. It's just sometimes that's the deciding factor when you're with very competitive, candidates and they have got 5 offers. Sometimes it's the way you treated them or how you interact with them that makes a difference, and that should never be underestimated. I think because of the really 1,600 applicants for 2 jobs in 24 hours, there was 1,598 people who were kind of crushed. So I think that as these recruiters are cycling back into the workforce, there will be a new level of empathy about the way they treat people. And I think that can only benefit companies, and just good karma. I'm a fan of that. And I think that it will really change what the game changers are as people are trying to make decisions, and it will really be around how they are treated in the process. And I think if we're really being honest, the way you're treated in the process is very indicative of how you'll be treated as an employee. And you should not ignore those red flags. But I think, so I'm hoping that like a little more kindness and empathy is part of how people experience the job search going forward in 2024.
As I look at 24, I think it's super unclear. I mean, I think that there's a few things, though, I think that may hold true. One, I feel like 2024 will continue to be a year of efficiency for companies. They're going to have to remain to be efficient because the market is currently demanding profitability and efficiency. And so I think we'll continue to see companies strive to be efficient and make intentional decisions around hiring and all those types of things. And I think we're going to see, and this is kind of the buzzword right now, but I think we're going to see automation and AI start to play a role in like how companies can be efficient. And I don't think that's going to like take away a ton of roles that are out there. But I think as we just talked about, there's a ton of like inefficiency and productivity right now for recruiters. We're getting a ton of active inbound. Hiring managers have this sense that like there's so much more availability in the market. We're managing all of that. We're managing finance on like what roles are open, what roles aren't open. There's just a lot of other productivity issues that recruiters are facing. And so I think we're going to need some tools to kind of help manage through some of those things, bucket candidates in certain ways, and automate some of those things. We're using an automation tool within scheduling for interviews that's helped us kind of maintain a smaller team, but also give them more time to flex in other areas, to help out in other areas that we need help. So I think 2024 is going to continue to be a year of efficiency. I'm optimistic because I think there's a lot of money that's kind of locked up in the VC community right now that I think as confidence starts to build, all that takes is like a few lead investors to start doing some things, and they all start following suit. And there's $300 billion locked up in VCs right now. And I think that's the real opportunity that we don't really understand yet. And there's a bunch of hesitation there, but I think we're starting to see some of that get unlocked. We've seen it in the biotech, like we're starting to see biotech investment go back to kind of what it was pre-pandemic. It didn't really dip below that for too long. So that's very encouraging for us in the mid-market space. And I think that's where we'll start to see some of these recruiting jobs open back up. And I also think like a lot of the larger companies like Google and Meta, and like we're already seeing them realize that maybe they cut too deep and they might have to make some decisions around bringing people back and opening roles. So I think there's a bunch of opportunity out there, but it's kind of masked right now and a little bit unclear where it's going to kind of pop first. But I agree with Kelly too, that like we could see kind of I don't think it's going to be a huge rebound, but like it'll be a recovery of the market next year. But we're going to continue to see a lot of like demand for efficiency.
I mentioned, I think I have had my own personal pivots. So I love pivots. So I'm hearing things like fractional. I'm hearing things like consulting, career coaches. And I guess maybe for a long time, for those of us who do decide to do that, it was an uncomfortable or risk because you were comfortable in your current situation. But I like this moment of time where people can discover they might be, they want to be their own boss, like Tammy, or they want to do fractional work or do more consulting. So I applaud those. For those who decide they want to stay more, the traditional, like working for a company, I would think of not being jack of all trades, but think of it more like you're a subject matter expert to two major things. So within recruiting, so it used to be like sourcing and recruiting. But I'm thinking more like operations and recruiting and talent branding. Anything else you can think of where it's like multiple buckets where they may not be able to hire two people for those two jobs, you could be that person. So if you've had the time, or if you've been job searching and that's what you invest in, something that you're not familiar with, that's still relatable, I think that's where the trend's going to be. You're just going to have to be standing out, not with your past experience, but what you've actually brought on as part of your growth. And I'll give a good example because the person I did hire in the recruiting role had an ops experience and a little bit of people management, but she decided she wanted to go into individual contributor. So, and the reason why I had that role combined was exactly what I just said. I couldn't afford two people. So I needed someone that was more like 80% recruiting and 20% I really want to do ops, and she luckily had those skills. So I couldn't have just gone to hire someone with only ops or somebody with only recruiting. So she won in that space of the 1,600 people.
I want to piggyback off that. What you said was really interesting, and I do agree. And I think that between what you said, Jenny, and what you said, Dean, I think that for me, I can distill that down to really differentiation. And so if you are a company, an employer looking to hire, and at the same time, if you were a job seeker, I think that we as recruiters, we know this to be true. How are we going to differentiate ourselves from the competition, right? And that's something to really sort of think about. And just to sort of take back that question and provide maybe an additional answer, I think that for 2024, one of the things that we can anticipate is additional change, and that is the only constant, right? Wherever we go and in every aspect of our life, professional and then certainly personal, right? And so I think that's something to be prepared for, and that goes back to what Dean was saying about flexing, right? And you actually prompted something, Dean, in my mind with your response. I think that what, in your opinion, which it's true, and we're here because we value your opinion, and thank you for sharing it. But I think that 2024 is going to be maybe a year of really looking at increased productivity, efficiency, automation, et cetera. I very much agree with that, and I think that with that. That can be managed with a management system, but also, I just lost my train of thought. With managing, ensuring that we have greater efficiency automation, we do need to be a lot more thoughtful about being more data-driven. And I think that as a leader, but also as a job seeker, if you can maybe come from that perspective, that might be a way to sort of differentiate yourself from the competition, but also as a job seeker, but also as a leader running an organization, a TA organization, that will allow you to sort of better plan and be more responsive to the market.
Thank you guys so much. This is the part where we get to applause and thank you for sharing your talents. We have a present for each of you because we had to thank you by way of a gift. That's one of my love languages. You have to give a gift. So seriously, thank you. I was hanging on your every word, and I feel like learned personally so much. And we know there has to be burning questions in the audience. Oh, of course. Do you want me to use the mic?
Sure. Yeah.
Thank you. So I've been in talent for 25 years. I've seen it transform, as have all of you, from however many years ago, 10 years ago, going, oh my God, you hired us such great people, that's so wonderful, to what happened over the past 3 years, which was, how come I don't understand potential markets that I should go and hire engineers from? Like, right, market mapping and bringing in data that we weren't supported with, to getting a seat at the table, finally, sometimes in small companies, to be able to come in and say, hey, here's how we should think about your workforce and where we're going. And you have so many, 2022, with the Great Resignation and everything, was just so crazy that you're just running ragged and you're exhausted, right? So what I'm hearing in your answers today, and I want to kind of like highlight them, is what you're grateful that you were able to bring to the business. And I hear strategy, right? I hear strategic business partner. So I hear it in the management system that you mentioned, and then hiring 2.0 and all of the different layers there, and thinking about the people and tapping back into the people. So my question is, for this group of people that might just be junior recruiters up through potential leaders, and you started to get into this in your last answers, but what's the top advice you would give people to show up as a strategic TA person, leader, what have you, in today's market so that they can differentiate themselves? So I hear data, but like, where should they really lean in to be able to tell this story about themselves, to showcase themselves as a true strategic partner? Because I believe that is where TA is headed, which excites me, because it should have always been like that, but we get now to do it. So long-winded, but hopefully that was somewhat clear.
I'll jump in. So I think the data is a given thing, and I think even with data, though, I have kind of a love-hate relationship with data with recruiting, because I think there's so much gray area that doesn't always tell the story. And so I think that the best recruiters that I've ever worked with, the best recruiting leaders, I talked about like being great storytellers, but I think there's another component of that, of the best people I've worked with, and they're great coaches. And they're coaching people who don't necessarily want to be coached. So they're coaching the way they don't know they're being coached. You know, like it's at the end of the conversation, maybe that leader thinks it was their great idea that just came out of that conversation. But I think it's really building that trust so you can have the hard conversations like, hey, so-and-so, we've had this search open for 3 months. You've interviewed 10 people that are amazing. You don't like any of them. Where are we missing the boat? Like, what's the deal? And having really real conversations. And I think that being able to build that kind of rapport is priceless with leaders because they don't know what they don't know. And sometimes, I mean, I think in general, people lead with good intentions. So people are not typically doing something to be terrible or deceptive or anything like that. But sometimes they just can't get out of their own way. And I think letting them understand that you are literally the subject matter expert. This is all I do every day. I always say, like, our team is here to build a company. You actually have a full-time job. Our job is to make your job easier by helping you attract and hire amazing people. And letting them understand that you're like truly a partner, I think it's not transactional anymore. I think that's a thing of the past. And it's really about strong partnerships. And I think being able to show that, whether it's in an interview or once you start a job, is the fastest way to build a really successful career.
I think you have to know the target audience that you're trying to apply to. So whether it's the vertical, so the superpower, or you're trying to differentiate yourself. For example, if you're going for startups, it's because maybe even if you were at a large company, they had a spin-off, or maybe they had a mergers and acquisition thing where you'd had to take on a new project to build from within. So the hard answer is it depends what type of company you're actually going for. Obviously, if you decide to go for a larger company, then everything about scale, everything about adapting to, you know, the kind of growth that they need, I would say that's an example. So I guess just like I wouldn't say what are the best interview questions, I would say it depends on what kind of brand you're trying to portray or what kind of company or opportunities you're looking for, and to kind of reverse engineer that. I think everyone does have that. Maybe it takes somebody else to tell you, like your previous manager, or maybe someone you've networked here who you've worked before. I think you said you worked with someone like from SAP like years ago, for them to actually tell you what makes you different, what makes you as a great leader, and the potential for a great leader, all of those things. So this is kind of, to me, a time for exploration. I know it's very, it's really flowery to say that because, you know, we have bills to pay, we need to find a job, all of that. But at the end of the day, you know, jumping into a bad relationship or a bad company is not going to help yourself, whether it's esteem or your experience along the way. So I'd rather, and I've been laid off before, so like I understand that period of time. There's peace of mourning, there's exploration, but I think in the long run it actually helped me in deciding what I didn't want. Yeah, so I don't know if that helps.
Yeah, I think those are great points. And I think I was thinking to say something like, I think it's really important to be creative right now. I think creativity is important in all aspects. So like you're saying, like, know your pitch, you know who you are, what you're good at, what you want to pitch somebody, because you're going to, you know, with 1,000 applicants, you're going to have 30 seconds to like kind of win that pitch and try and win their interest in you. So know that piece. I also think like there's a lot of opportunity right now in adjacent markets. So I'm seeing people, you know, maybe take a government role that they wouldn't have taken in the past. I think there's opportunity to, I've even been thinking for myself, what if I was impacted? You know, maybe there's a couple startups that just got funding where you could be a contract recruiter between both of them, like a fractional kind of situation. Look for those kind of like creative opportunities in the market. And I think, you know, treat the search the same way you would for like your hiring manager manager, be systematic about what you're looking for. I also think it's just going to take resilience. Like it may make time. You need to take a little time off and then focus on it again. So I think being creative is really important. Treat it as like kind of a system in a search that you're doing for yourself. Look at these adjacent opportunities could be a good option as well. Or like, this fractional concept of like supporting a couple companies where they're not ready to hire somebody full time, but you could work between the two as long as they're not, maybe in the same space.
Could I just jump back in on an actual example, which is I had a recruiter that was laid off, somebody I've known for a long time. I always knew she was a great coach. So I actually introduced her to the company that I coach for called Career Contessa, and she's now a coach for them. So sometimes it's just, she didn't realize that she had that. It was always in her arsenal. It's just somebody else needed to show her that, and knowing the pain points as a recruiter and now as a candidate, I think she was able to build that empathy and actually be a great career coach. So I just want to give that example as an adjacent opportunity. I don't think she's going to go back to recruiting, actually.
So all great points, and I agree with everything that all of you guys said. I think to add to it, one of the things that I would say is if you are in transition right now, take advantage of this time. I think almost all of us here have been, laid off at one point or another. And yes, there's a period of mourning and, there's a period of uncertainty, but take this time. Time is our greatest luxury. Take this time to celebrate, quite frankly, and take this time also to explore and understand what it is that you're looking for. Where do you excel? What do you like? What don't you like? What do you want in your next role? What don't you want in your next role? In the event, let's say hypothetically, if you're looking for a leadership position, I think that, as you do your research and figure out these are the companies I want to work for, or the types of companies that I want to work for. Obviously, the name of the recruiting game is the ABCs of it. Always be closing. Always be closing to get the interview. Always be closing to get the next interview and the offer, et cetera, et cetera. And so do your research. Talk to as many companies as possible, and then you can figure out, okay, this is getting me closer to what it is I want. This is getting me closer to what I don't want, and you will hone your interview skills. Because even though we interview candidates all day long, when we are the interviewer, it's a different mindset. It's a slightly different approach, right? So take that time to really perhaps practice, right? And also the way to differentiate yourself, you said the word strategy. If you're looking for a leadership position, what are they looking for in that leader? Are they looking for a sourcing strategy? Are they looking for a DE&I strategy? Are they looking to, build top of funnel, and what that means to me? And we fell into this conversation. Top of funnel is a sourcing strategy. It is a DE&I program. It is also the talent brand. All of those stand on its own, but they have relationships with the other two initiatives. And those actually happen to be my initiatives that I'm trying to evolve into pillars. But in any event, go prepared to your interview with a basic framework of all of those strategies, whatever it is that company is seeking. And I think that's really how you can differentiate yourself from other candidates.
Thank you. I think we have time for one more question. So yeah, let's hear it.
So I have a question around like DE&I and recruiting, and I know this was like a super big buzzword, especially in 2020 after George Floyd. And for me personally, this was something that I was super passionate about myself, running talent people in HR at a startup in a very like white, cis, straight, male-dominated industry. Like decentralized identity is very like blockchain and stuff like that is very homogenous. So I'm curious to know how you all continue to build safe and inclusive teams. And it's interesting because I had a women at Passbase, which is my old company, ERG, and we ended up implementing a completely new interviewing step. And the conversation was actually ironically born out of a topic of bras in the workplace. And so we found it to be a super effective way to kind of like identify the people that would continue to build safe, which ultimately leads to more productivity, higher performance, things like that. So I'm curious to know how you all implement, whether in an explicit interview step or holistically, how do you continue to index and find the right people that are going to continue to build safe and high performing spaces?
One way that I think we continue to invest there is just around structured interviewing. I think the more structured your interviews are and the more that everybody's kind of following a common set and evaluating at the same level and everybody's kind of on an equal playing ground of how you're evaluating across every candidate was important to us. And I think writing all those things down and having the interview teams be kind of like calibrated to all of that has been a really important step for us. I think we've also kind of spent more time at the top of the funnel, just making sure that we're focused on, a certain percentage of time that we're investing there. Also, like we have like an inclusive sourcing jam where we make sure that like we spend time as a team on, recruiting for diversity within the pipelines and for underrepresented minorities. And then I think we kind of rely on structured interviewing as like the next step there. And then also I think it's really about like trying to look at the data and analyze your pass-through rates too on where are things falling off. Like sometimes you may face a situation where even with structured interviewing, you continue to see kind of women falling out of the process at some point, for a certain role. You have to ask yourself those hard questions around what's going on. Is it a question that we're asking? Are we asking it in the wrong way? Is it being administered in the interview in the wrong way? And so I think it's this like constant evolution and iteration of your interview process, and then looking at the data from time to time to make sure that like you're not having those fall offs, and then go back and be that consultant to say, hey, we're having an issue here. I'm concerned about it. Are you concerned about it? How can we work together to fix it and adjust as you go? But I think it's like many fixes that are kind of all throughout the different areas, but those are just a few that we're kind of focused on here.
I'll just say that when we did the layoff, it's funny, when we did the layoff, nobody talked about this topic, right? Like the hard work that it took for companies to bring on women or DEI talent, when it came to layoffs, that wasn't part of the conversation. So I think we did some data to kind of show them like now we need to play catch up in some way, because generally a lot of the positions that we had to let go, they weren't super senior roles. And so generally there were a lot of women and DEI members as part of that group. I like to give hiring manager choices. There's either you find cross-team interviewers that represent our consumers, or you let us source first before we post a job, before we do referrals. So we usually take about 3 to 5 business days before we post a job, which gives sort of the hiring managers this urgency, like, okay, I want to help out. I want to help out with referrals, knowing that generally women and DIs, find this checklist, and if they don't meet the 100%, they don't apply. Or it takes much longer as passive candidates to convince them to take the risk from going to a company they know to something maybe they really want to do. Another thing we did was, when I say choices, was we were asked to have goals, recruiting goals. And I said no. I said, I'll do it if 50% of the goal comes from the clients. Guess what? They didn't want to do it. So based on that, they weren't ready. So I think every client, every situation is slightly different, but if you give them sort of choices, it's almost like giving your kid choices of broccoli or cabbage. They choose one, right? And so I think that's what we're kind of going with our hiring managers. It's like, you're adults, but we're going to guide you, but here are a couple ways that you can actually start to solve that problem. Not solve, just improve it. Yeah.
Totally agree on the structured interviewing. Let's like level the playing field as much as we can. Let's start with that. I also think, kind of going back to something I said earlier about having really real conversations with your hiring managers, like, here's what we're trying to accomplish. Can you help us? I personally say that I like to have a recruiting team that looks like the company I'm trying to build. I think that recruiters are the very first interface that candidates have with a company. You are the ambassadors. So can they see themselves in you? I think that's super important. And then I think cross-functional, cross-everything interview team is super critical. I worked most recently in a situation where there was lots of white guys, hardly any women, hardly any people of color. And so you also have to be very careful, though, as you're asking people with their full-time jobs to interview, that people are not being tokenized. Like, hey, can you be on this interview panel yet again? And so how are we sharing the burden, but also making candidates understand like what this place could look like? Is there a tribe here? That kind of thing. So this is not a very good answer, but I think there's no silver bullet. It's a really hard question. We could probably have like a 4-hour panel on just this, and it'd be super interesting conversation, because I think, back in 2020, all of those consulting firms were maxed out. You had to interview to get a consultant to work with you on this, and now they're all folding up, and it's heartbreaking because it was such great progress that started happening in 2020. And why did we just decide that wasn't important anymore? It's insane. So I think as recruiting leaders, recruiting professionals, like, we own driving that charge and really helping remind leaders why it's important that the company doesn't all look the same. I think it's one of like the challenges with referrals. People tend to prefer people that look just like them. So if you're already in a company of a bunch of white guys, all their referrals are going to look like them. So it's a really tough nut to crack, and I think it's a really interesting challenge. And I really hope that recruiting professionals will continue to push this agenda, because there's been less budget for these kind of things, but there's a lot of things you can do without budget. And I think part of it's just being really super intentional of how you spend your time with sourcing and that kind of thing.
So DE&I is really something very near and dear to my heart, for the very obvious reason that I am a woman and a woman of color, right? And so I understand what we see it more oftentimes than not, right? Very homogenous workplace, and it gets a bit more homogenous, at the executive level. But what's interesting about DE&I is that I think that if we started to think it differently following George Floyd. And I think that as recruiters, I agree with what Kelly said. We as recruiters have every opportunity to impact how we influence more diverse recruiting and hence hiring. And so if we think about DE&I differently, where we think about it as a daily practice, right? That can further the cause. I think that from a DE&I perspective, it's the sum of all of the parts, right? Everything from putting together that strategic sourcing strategy. Where are you going to go? What diverse professional organizations are you going to recruit from? Where can you post? Structured interviewing is a very big part of it. Even how you write job descriptions, right? Something as nuanced or even overlooked as saying, we're looking for someone with excellent communication skills versus someone with effective communication skills. That is the D and the I in the DE&I, right? And I say that every day to in multiple conversations. Oh, well, that's the E and the I in DE&I. So it's a daily practice. It's always at the forefront of our mind. And so if we kind of think about DE&I from start to finish, then we can kind of continue to move that ball forward, as opposed to move that ball sort of up the hill, as it were, kind of like the Sisyphus scenario. But I think it's really sort of a daily practice.
Thank you so much. And I feel like we have a couple of ideas for future fireside chats, actually. So I know everyone's hopefully eager to grab another glass of wine or some snacks. So just one last big thank you for sharing your time. All right, enjoy.
Thank you all for hosting, too.